Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us again this evening. We've been here before, haven't we? Let's face it, but very nice. I'm very much looking forward to hearing our presentation this evening, which is being given by the lovely Sarah Malcolm, who's in our sales team. Fantastic, Sarah. So, usual rules of engagement. You've probably heard me, those of you that have been on many of these calls, and I know that many of you have heard me saying this many times, but usual rules of engagement: please keep your microphones muted and your video off. That would be very, very helpful. Thank you. We've got a lot of people on the call this evening, which is, or rather on the presentation this evening, I should say, which is absolutely super. Thank you very much. We very much appreciate the time that you spend with us coming to these events, and we know how well they're being received, and we're delighted to put them on. So Zimbabwe is a place that I am very lucky to have been on a number of occasions, not only adding it on to trips that I've done to Zambia, but I've been to Zimbabwe independently on a number of occasions. It's an absolutely super country. I'm sure many of you have been to Zimbabwe. If you haven't been to Zimbabwe, I would highly recommend it. It is one of the most beautiful countries in Africa. I may well say that about every country in Africa, but it is certainly one of the most beautiful countries in Africa. And of course, it has the Victoria Falls, as well as Zambia having the Victoria Falls. What could be better than that? And it was one of the first countries that I organised trips to when I started Wildlife Worldwide back in 1992. So we did a lot to Zambia, we did a lot to Zimbabwe, and to all of the countries in the region. So it will be particularly nice to hear Sarah's presentation this evening about Zimbabwe. Let me just, excuse me, whilst I let someone else into the meeting. So yes, it'd be lovely to hear Sarah talking about Zimbabwe. For those of you that don't know Sarah, Sarah's been with us for a few years now. She is one of our wildlife consultants. Many of you will have chatted to her. Sarah is incredibly well-travelled, having been to such far-flung places as the Russian Far East, India, Sri Lanka. I know she's done a number of different bits and pieces in Europe. Sarah worked in Kenya for a horse riding operation some years ago, and also worked in Botswana for a horse riding operation, and has travelled to lots and lots of lovely places in Africa. So I will hand over to Sarah in just a second, but just a final reminder to everybody that if you would like to ask questions, we would love to hear your questions. And if you use your chat facility, which is at the bottom of your screen on a computer or laptop, or the top of your screen, I believe, if you're on a handheld device, then those chat messages come directly to me, and I will pose those questions to Sarah at the end. But Sarah, without further ado, I shall therefore hand over to you, if I may, and let you crack on, because I'm sure you're there, and I think you are unmuted. Yes, you are unmuted. Yep. Very good. Well played. Over to you.
Thanks, Chris. All right. Well, thank you for joining tonight's Discovery Evening. This next half hour, I'm going to take you vicariously on a safari through Zimbabwe. Our journey this evening takes us from our sofas to the enchanting forest of Mana Pools, where we will walk under the mahogany trees in the tracks of wild dogs. Then, as we follow the route of the Zambezi River downstream, we arrive at Lake Kariba to explore the Bumi Hills and Matusadona National Park. Then, trading our border with Zambia, the one with Botswana, we head to the southwest, where we will reach Hwange National Park and explore its drastically different landscape and wildlife inhabitants. Then, after nights beside the campfire, as we've been eavesdropping on the sounds of wildlife going about their escapades, these strange yet comforting noises will be eclipsed as we reach the thunderous Victoria Falls to conclude our journey. And by sharing my safari experience in Zimbabwe tonight, I hope to convey to you why I, like Chris, believe it to be an incredible destination. So to begin, let us return to Mana Pools. Thinking back to when I first arrived at Mana Pools, my initial kind of memory is this overwhelming sensation of enchantment. It's often the light which can be responsible for charming a place. And here, the towering mahogany, acacia, and mapani forests of Mana Pools sieve the sunlight to create this dappled effect on the ground, which intermittently highlights a passing herd of eland or impala. And in the dry season, their hooves lift small clouds of dust which dance in these shards of lights and creates a really atmospheric and iconic scene. However, I arrived in Mana Pools in May, and April-May is when the water in the park has subsided just enough for tourists to return. As the park had until recently been closed for the wet season since November, we had this feeling of exploring a new place as the vines and the branches, which had over the last months done their best to reclaim the roads, and they clamoured kind of to enter our safari vehicle. So at this time of year, the foliage was lush and the wildlife and the bird life were really reveling in this time of plenty. However, the unexpected memory which persists vividly when I recall my safari, and one which helps explain this sense of enchantment, which for me will always be synonymous with Mana Pools, was the many small soft clouds of butterflies which filled the air. Their wings, like white and yellow petals, were glinting in the dappled light as they kind of danced all around us and then settled back on the foliage like closing a bow. Our first day was at Hwange camp. The name Hwange means guinea fowl, and we were greeted by both helmeted and crested guinea fowl species when we arrived in camp. So this camp is set about 15 kilometers inland from the Zambezi River, and it overlooks this permanent waterhole, which, as I was mentioning, the butterflies, it also was decorated by these butterflies, which were kind of quenching their thirst on the outer edges. But also, so were the colossal elephants and every different size species in between. And in the drier months, you can easily just stay in camp all day in one of these sofas, which you can see in the photograph, and just watch as the wildlife really just comes to you. But however good the armchair safari experience is here, and the game drives in the purpose-built, open-sided vehicles, which are also fantastic, it's the opportunity to explore the cathedral forests of Mana Pools on foot, which will provide you with the very best, most memorable encounters. Mana Pools is rightfully well known for its walking safaris, as well as its wild dog population. And this was even before we eagerly followed the personal histories of Blacktip and Kate in David Attenborough's dynasty. This series of images were taken by my colleague Brett Jarman, who I'm sure lots of you will know and perhaps even travelled with before. And these photos were taken during one of our small group photography tours to Mana Pools, where the group were able to get out on foot and have this incredible perspective of the dogs from ground level. And you can see here how I mentioned earlier the light and the dust coming up to create this really ethereal scene, which Brett's captured so incredibly in this photograph. But those who watched the Dynasties documentary will also know that although wild dogs are incredibly successful hunters, they have a big threat from other predators. Lion, hyena, and even leopard share the theatre of Mana pools with the wild dogs. And this is alongside a cast of antelope and birds and other mammals too. One such mammal, which is iconic to most African safaris, can be seen here in a slightly different way. It's the heroic strength and remarkable ingenuity of Boswell, the elephant, which has entered him into the Elephant Hall of Fame, alongside the likes of Kenya's Tim and Sefau. Boswell is famed not for being a super tusker, although he does have a very admirable set of tusks on him, as you can see in this photograph here. But he is famous for the way in which he braces his entire considerable weight onto his two back legs and hauls himself up, circus style, hence the name Boswell, to access the best of the unreached seed pods. And you can see here he's being shadowed by some other young bulls. And these elephants have learnt this behavior from Boswell, and they try and replicate it to access these top shelf snacks that he's got all to himself. But this old bull is really well known for being the master. So Mana translates as 4 in the local Shona language, and the park is named after these 4 main lagoons. And these lagoons actually mark the historical route of the Zambezi River, which now divides Mana pools with Zambia's Lower Zambezi National Park on the other side. So heading out on canoes, we spent the afternoon drifting down the Zambezi River. And at one stage, we nestled into the riverbank to appease a particularly rambunctious hippo. And as we did this, and we quietly drifted downstream, hugging the reedy bank, which was adorned with these unmoving painted frogs. One particular reed, which was a bit girthier than its neighbours, turned its neck to reveal the beak of a Goliath heron. Now this beautiful, beautiful bird turned its head, and we saw this large yellow eye, which was scanning the prey, for the same prey as the numerous fish eagles which were perched nearby. And with both the riverine and the forested environments, there is a really wonderful variety of bird life which can be enjoyed on a visit to Mana pools. So we continue to float downstream below the unseen beating wings of the hovering pied kingfishers, and the sky begins to transition from blue, orange and pink as we beached our canoes on the sandbank below our next camp, which was called Zambezi Expeditions Camp. And here we traded our life jackets and paddles for gin and tonics. So we moved from the riverside sundowners via dinner to the campfire. And here we sat beneath the unfathomable stars. Now, for anyone who has seen the stars in the Southern Hemisphere without light pollution, you'll know just how impossible it is to do justice to it with words or even photographs. This was a really clear night, and our guide, who had the bonus knowledge of astronomy, was explaining some of the constellations to us. The dazzling Milky Way, he explained, was locally called Guara Renzo, which translates to elephant pathway. So we were trying to quietly consider this new nugget of information and store it in our brains. And as if to cement it, out from the riverbank appeared 6 elephants, which moved up past our fire pit and then disappeared past us through camp. I've been really lucky to have many elephant encounters, more than I can guess to number, but this one really stands out to me. And I think largely the reason for this, aside from the red wine and the stars, is because Mana pools has this very special quality. Our tents were dotted along the river under the shade of winterthorn and ebony trees. And this meant that we are sleeping with just a thin canvas between you and the grazing hippo, and nothing between you and the starlit elephant as you sit by the fire. This, combined with not encountering another person, and there being very few lodges in Mana Pools, and having the opportunity to encounter wildlife on foot or in a canoe, all come together to make each experience in Mana Pools so special. Leaving Mana, we drove to the bush runway, awaiting our Cessna to hop us over to Lake Kariba. And we took the traditional drive down the length of the clearing to make sure there weren't any animals or obstacles which the plane might encounter. And we were expecting perhaps to move along a confusion of guinea fowl. And confusion is actually the official and very appropriate collective noun for guinea fowl. But instead, we were happily surprised to come across a pack of snoozing wild dogs. I'm not sure if any of you noticed, just in the shadow in the corner of the photograph is one of the wild dogs just laid up as our Cessna arrived. So this managed to increase my already huge reluctance to leave Mana Pools, and we had all been willing the plane to arrive late. So moving on with our journey, we continued to Lake Kariba. And this, as I mentioned, was with a Cessna, which had been and continued to be our very efficient air taxi between the parks. Albeit man-made, Lake Kariba is a really dazzling landscape, and especially the sunset views. And the lodge we stayed at was more luxurious. It was very luxurious. It was absolutely stunning lodge. And I wondered at first if this was to make up any lack of wildlife. But I was very soon corrected of this when we had 3 encounters with a small group of a small pride of lions during just a 2-night stay. One of these encounters was during a walking safari along the lakeside, and we had been admiring the organisational skills of the determined termites and watching hippos and buffalo, hippos and elephants and bird life all around us, when our guide calmly advised us of our new company. Now, the standards of guides in Zimbabwe is exceptional. Keeps better than the standard of my photography here. But I was particularly grateful to be in such good hands when, after meeting the lions and returning soon to our vehicle, we then very quickly witnessed one of the females hunting and attempting to use the water to help her catch these impala, albeit unsuccessfully. So as well as the competence of guides around the wildlife, it's really their passion and knowledge which captivates a safari goer. And we arrived in Hwange at an important moment. Our guide Lewis explained to us that these brothers, named Humba and Natasi, were in the process of moving in to take over the area's pride. Lewis knew the individual stories of these lions, and then he kind of shared this with us and revealed to us that to some degree, so did we. And I'm going to just quickly run through a summary of the cast and story here. So this was Cecil the lion's pride, and Lewis had us really captivated as he revealed the dramas and power shifts since Cecil's famous and tragic demise. He explained how Cecil was succeeded by his brother Jericho, who was then replaced by a lion called Kubesi, who was in charge at the time of our arrival and that of these 2 brothers in May 2018. And it was only days after we left that we learned that Bubesi had realized he was no match for these two brothers, Humber and Natasi, and he pegged it. He pegged it to find some other territory and didn't stay around to fight them off. So this left Cecil's pride with the decision of what to do. Do they approach these brothers, or do they also leave? Bear in mind they have, cubs, and that's always a danger. So it was actually Cece, who's one of Cecil's daughters, who was first to join the brothers. And she's also very recently continued the family fame. And you may have seen an incredible video where a lioness is holding a limp wild dog in her mouth, and the other dogs in the pack are doing their best to distract the lioness, and they succeed in doing so. She drops the seemingly dead dog onto the ground, runs off after another of the pack, and remarkably, this dog, which we all in the video can see looks to be dead, was actually playing dead, jumps up and makes its escape. I mean, perhaps it was watching The Lion King growing up, but hearing about the pride dynamics and the individual stories relayed to us by the guides makes each encounter all the more interesting. So the next morning, we left Somalisa camp, this beautiful camp, which you can see in the photograph here, only to loop back moments later, following the arrival of 3 cheetah siblings, which posed beautifully for us. Hwange is the largest of Zimbabwe's national parks, but in my experience, we really did not have to travel far from the lodge to see so much wildlife. The park is also teeming with elephants, and between safari drives, we would return to the lodge to relax by the decking, only to be accompanied by these elephants. So certainly make sure to take a selection of camera lenses with you, because a big zoom isn't always one that you want. So after a wildlife-filled 2 days in the arid, thirsty Hwange, we flew north to the smoke that thunders, also known as Victoria Falls. And I've seen the falls many times at different times of year, where the water flow varies from a torrent to a trickle. And most of the time, it's absolutely breathtaking, regardless of the time of year. However, on this occasion, we coincided fortuitously with a full moon. Now, I had never even heard of a lunar rainbow before, but it's something I won't ever forget, and is one of the many treasured memories I have from a safari in Zimbabwe. We offer a variety of options, from small group tours to photography tours and tailor-made safaris to Zimbabwe. And I'll be really delighted to speak to you further about the incredible accommodation, the logistics, and any other questions you have about this fantastic destination.
Great stuff, Sarah. Thank you very, very much indeed. That was absolutely fantastic. I need to go back, basically, having not been for a while. I've got to get back there. So what do I ask you first? Oh, goodness gracious. Don't know where to start. But I always say that, I guess. But that's because we always get lots of questions. I tell you what, I'm actually going to pose a question and answer it at the same time, because it's one that I've had a couple of times well, actually had it on one of the last calls, but also on this one as well. And it's a question about quarantining. So it's a COVID related question. So Sarah, forgive me, but I'll answer this to sort of just to help. But Amanda has posed a very obvious and sensible question, which is when can we go to, when do we think as a company it would be possible to go to Zimbabwe without quarantining? I think Amanda and everybody, it is an almost impossible question for us to answer at the moment. We're watching this sort of stuff very, very closely, as you can imagine, and we're hoping it's going to be sooner rather than later. But any, anything I say or Sarah says or anyone else says, for the moment at least, would be speculative. So I think that's quite a tough one for us to get our heads around. But we'll certainly be getting back to Zimbabwe as soon as we possibly can. Someone else, forgive me, I have forgotten who it was now, but I'm going to find, yes, Louise. Louise has asked for a reminder, Sarah, of the name of the camp that you were staying at in Kariba.
It's called Bumi Hills Safari Lodge.
I've stayed there as well, and very nice it is too, if I'm not mistaken, with magnificent views out across the lake. Yeah, incredible,
especially like the sunset views just blow your mind.
Yeah, really, really, really fantastic. And one of the brilliant things about Lake Kariba, of course, is the all around the shore of Lake Kariba are these amazing skeletal trees, aren't there? Which in the sunset you see all, well, and not just in the sunset, but you see all sorts of amazing things like a whole plethora of different eagles and storks and egrets and a whole any number of different things, all sorts of passerines and all sorts of amazing things. So that's it's one of the absolute delights, I think, of being at Lake Kariba. So look.
Sorry, Chris. I also forgot to mention that at Lake Kariba, like a lot of the time throughout the itinerary, you're able to do things like bush dinners and bush breakfast, and they do this incredible bush dinner along the banks of Lake Kariba, where you have the setting sun and, as you mentioned, Chris, those amazing kind of trees which are remnants from before the lake was dammed, and it's just, I mean, you can't really beat it for a dinner spot, and all the birds kind of perched on there, and wonderful.
It's fab, isn't it? Now you mentioned birds, and one of the questions I have had here is whether Zimbabwe is good for birders, and if so, is there a particular part of the country that you would recommend for birders to go to? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, absolutely, yes, amazing bird species to be seen throughout. But one thing I'd say is that going from Mana Pools to Lake Kariba and then on to Hwange, you've got 3 very different environments. So you get different species kind of thriving in each as well. And you've also got other areas throughout Zimbabwe which have some wonderful birds. I know we were speaking earlier, Chris, about further to the south where it's very good, particularly good for raptors. I don't know if you want to elaborate on.
Yeah, well, I can actually, because, well, we were talking, weren't we, before we started, we were talking about the Matobo Hills, an area which used to be called the Matopos, but it's called the Matobo Hills, and it's an absolutely fantastic place for raptors, and it's particularly good for black eagle or Vero's eagle, which is the largest of the eagles in southern Africa anyway, but it's particularly good for that. But the other thing it's particularly good for, of course, the Matobo Hills is black rhino, and so that makes it a particularly exciting location to visit. Someone else has just asked now, actually, whether Zimbabwe is good for sunbirds, whether it's possible to see sunbirds. But of course, there's lots and lots and lots of lovely sunbirds that you can see in various parts of, well, actually throughout southern Africa, and certainly throughout Zimbabwe. You will see sunbirds. Well, it would be highly unlikely not to see sunbirds of a variety of species during the course of one of these great trips. Different question for you from a different questioner. Andy has asked, is Hwange a good place for cheetah? He's clearly picked up on your cheetah photos that you showed from Somalisa, I think. Is it a good place for cheetah? And as an an additional question to that. He says, I've heard that Hwange it can be quite busy, and will I see a lot of other vehicles if I'm on safari in Hwange?
So yeah, Hwange is busier than the other parks that I mentioned. That's largely because of its proximity to Victoria Falls. It's a very quick journey between the two. So it does get busier, and because it's open all season. So the benefit of the route that we did, which I didn't actually mention, so thank you so much for asking, because it is important, is that Somalisa is actually on a concession. So you don't have the busy, crowded vehicles that you could possibly get in some of the areas of the park. So it's just the vehicles belonging to the lodges, the Somalisa camps. So very few vehicles in that area, and that said area is where there's healthy population of cheetah, and there's healthy population of lion, as well as much of the other wildlife as well. So you don't have
What
to
about leopard? Did you see leopard?
Didn't see leopard, no. You do have the chance of seeing leopard in Mana Pools, but it's not as good as sightings as perhaps in Luangwa.
I'd be a bit biased if someone asked me on that one. But I have had fantastic leopard sightings in Mana as well, and fantastic leopards in Hwange, come to think of it. That's
you have?
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant leopard sightings. Okay, so that's, and did you, when you were in Mana, did you see many other vehicles when you were there?
No, and that's one of the benefits of because I went in the green season as well, so it's even quieter then. But generally, Mana Pools is very much off the beaten safari track. So whether you go in peak season, which is kind of June, July, August, September, or whether you go in the green season, you're very unlikely to come across many people at all. And that's the absolute beauty of Mana Pools. It's just this kind of untraveled wilderness, which you feel like is your own when you're there.
And it's pretty as well, isn't it, Mana Pools? It's so beautiful, with lovely cathedral forest and the river running through it, and it's a fabulous place. So you mentioned seasons. Do you just want to give a bit of an overview on that side of things, rainy season and dry season?
Yeah, absolutely. So Hwange is open all year round. So if you wanted to add that on to another safari elsewhere, you can just do that, linked to Victoria Falls. But if you want to visit Mana Pools, there is more of a set season. So I mentioned earlier that the water levels subside enough to let you in, and that is April time. And then the park is open from April until November. And in late November, the rains arrive, and that's when the park starts closing again. So you've got a good window to travel to do that whole itinerary.
And you were just saying that, so Hwange's open year round, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, that's what I thought, which is good, because actually you could go down to, well, it'd be quite exciting to go down and do a Hwange Victoria Falls safari, and you could just do those two places, and you could do that at any time of the year. Wouldn't that be good?
And especially, sorry, if you're a photographer as well as the camps that I stayed at in Hwange, there's some which are dedicated photographer camps, photographic camps where they've got sunken hides. So if you want to just go to one place, which is quite appealing, I think, to a lot of us at the moment, to travel but not be traveling whilst we're there too much, then you can enjoy Hwange from one or two camps just in the area, and then finish it off with a Victoria Falls.
And if you were staying at, where did you stay when you were at Victoria Falls? Can you remind me? Or
I actually stayed on the Zambia side.
Okay.
There's so many wonderful, as you know, Chris, there's so many wonderful lodges that are kind of along the river, and there's just a huge variety of options depending on how much you want to spend. And the lodge that I stayed was Thorntree River Lodge, and it was sensational. But and so are so many of the lodges in that stretch of river.
There's so many fantastic lodges there on both sides of the river, on the Zambian side and the Zimbabwean side. I agree. There's many wonderful places. There's a malaria question here, which I will happily answer, Sarah. So someone, Nicola, has asked, how prevalent is malaria? Malaria is common in this part of the world, but if you are well prepared, then if you're well prepared and well protected, then your chances of catching malaria are pretty slim. And that does to an extent depend on the time of year that you're going and where you're going. So we can give you more specific advice on that, just depending on the nature of the trip that you want to, the nature of the trip that you want to do. Someone has asked, Sarah, if there are wild dogs in Hwange.
Yes, there are. Yes, so I mentioned that video where the lioness was holding one of the wild dogs in her mouth. So there are wild dogs there, and I think Chris and I both were looking at the video again earlier today.
That's fantastic.
And we'll have to share it with you all, so you'll have a glimpse of some of the wild dogs there. But yes, absolutely, you can see wild dog in Hwange.
That's I mean, it really is the most fantastic piece of video. I haven't seen anything like it before, and I will, when I send everybody an email, I'll send them a link to it as well. Someone has asked if and I know you did mention it, but I guess I'm now just asking the question to reiterate it, I guess. But someone asked if they can enjoy walking safaris in Zimbabwe, which of course you were able to do. So it's possible they missed that little bit of your presentation. But with the sub question of if I go on a walking safari, am I still likely to get good photographs? I suppose it partly depends what you're photographing, but
yeah, I mean, absolutely, especially Mana Pools. It's just so great for walking safaris, and that's why we do our trip with Brett, the photography trip, which is Mana Pools, Wild Dogs and Elephants photography, because you're out, you're on foot, and that's where he got this incredible image, was being at that low level, and you can see no one else is around, no other vehicles getting in the way of the photograph, and just see so much wildlife just through that way, and get that different perspective, because so many parks that you travel to in Southern Africa, you're not able to do that. So it's really, that's part of what's so special about Mana Pools.
Yeah, I agree. It's fantastic. And having done walking safaris in Zimbabwe myself, and of course in Zambia, I would wholeheartedly concur that you can get some fantastic photos when you're on foot. It's often different stuff, and you don't necessarily get quite so close. But again, that partly depends on the guide, doesn't it? It partly depends on what's around as well. Jan has asked, how close do you get to the wild dogs when you're on foot? I know you, I've not done this particular thing, but I know you've spent a lot of time chatting to Brett about it, but you might want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I wish I had one of Brett's videos actually to share with you.
Yeah.
When he came back from this trip, he made us all very envious of his encounters, and it was really remarkable how close they were to the pack of wild dogs, and particularly because they spent quite a lot of time sat quietly photographing them. The pack were very relaxed around them. They're very used to people on walking safaris, so of course they're also very inquisitive. So there were times, there's some photographs that Brett has where it's mind-blowing how they come up to investigate what's going on with the photographers who are laid on their bellies, and you're in such capable hands with the guides there. Honestly, I think I was completely blown away by the quality of the guides in every camp that I stayed at, but they really do take it seriously, even though you're able to get these incredibly close encounters on foot, which is very unique and special.
They're disconcertingly close, aren't they? When you look at the photographs, it's quite it sort of take your breath away. It takes your breath away a bit. So someone else has asked about night drives in Zimbabwe. Can you go night driving in Zimbabwe as you can in Zambia?
Yeah, you can. You can absolutely, especially there's a lot of freedoms that you have in Zimbabwe. Like I said about the bush breakfasts and the bush dinners, and that with the walking and the night drives, it really does allow for that. And part of the reason of that is because some of the lodges are as well on concessions too. So you do have that freedom to do that and look for the kind of nocturnal species, be it birds or mammals.
One or two people have asked, which again I'm very happy to answer, but one or two people have asked about Zimbabwe and whether there are problems going to Zimbabwe and stuff. Now, I think from our point of view as a company, we're very, very happy to send people to Zimbabwe. We're very selective, aren't we, about who we use in these places, and we always choose small specialist camps and safari lodges and so on to work with. And we do a lot of work with African bush camps, which is owned by a most fantastic Zimbabwean guy. But there have been 3 or 4 questions about this, and particularly, and latterly, a question about how friendly Zimbabwe is. I have my own answer to that, but I'm sure everybody would love to hear yours.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine you're about to say that it's just unbelievably friendly, the warmest of welcomes. I think, as you say, it's had its troubles in the past, and tourism hasn't really thrived there like it has in its neighbouring Zambia. So they really were appreciative of the people who travelled there, and were really, really proud of their country and their wildlife, and to share it with you. So yeah, absolutely warmest welcomes, and yeah, very, very good team that work out there to make sure everything runs completely smoothly.
And outstanding guides, right?
Outstanding, yeah.
Yeah, they're fantastic. So a couple of people have asked us about other parts of Zimbabwe that that they might be interested in visiting. There's been a number of places that have been mentioned. The Chimanimani Hills being one. Chisarira National Park. So it was Sarah that mentioned the Chimanimani Hills. Dave has mentioned Chisarira National Park. I know I mentioned the Matobo Hills. I think that there used to be 1 or 2 very nice places to stay in the Chimanimani Hills. It's not an area that I'm personally familiar with, and I'm pretty confident I can say that you're not familiar with the Chimanimanis either. I've been through Chisarira National Park, but this was a long time ago now, and my recollection is that there was only 1 or possibly 2 properties to stay at there. I don't think that at the moment they are open, but Dave, if you're interested in going to Chisarira, please feel free to make contact with me directly, and we can have a bit more of a chat about that offline. 1 or 2 people have spoken about some of the other activities. So you've been chatting about you've chatted about walking safaris, driving safaris, night drives, of course. Canoeing on the Zambezi. Did you have an opportunity to do that, or do you know how that works?
Yeah, so at Zambezi Expeditions, which was the second camp that we stayed at during the time in Mana Pools, and that's the one that's perched right on the edge of the river, and you can look across the river to the Lower Zambezi National Park. But you have these amazing views up and downstream of the river, and all the wildlife that comes through it and resides in it and visits it. But you do have the opportunity to also get out on the river in your canoes with a guide doing most of the hard work and steering you down the river. And how that works is you go on a very short little safari drive upstream, and you're met by your canoes and your canoe guide, who then takes you back downstream into camp. So you don't have to do much work, and yeah, you get these incredible encounters where you're below level with wildlife that are on the banks, be it waterbuck or elephant, and you're at eye level with hippopotamus as they come up to see what's going on. And yeah, again, bird life, you've got the pied kingfishers and all sorts flying around you, and it's a really relaxing way to see the wildlife, and kind of cruise downstream without any noise and without any effort, and then just cruise into camp. So yeah, it's very fun experience.
It's great, isn't it? And someone has asked here, a couple of people have said, do you see any crocs whilst canoeing? I say, I'm not even going to ask you, but yes is the answer. Every chance of seeing crocodiles, and it's lovely. And someone else has said, does it feel like an adrenaline activity? I would say it's exciting and fun, isn't it? I don't think I would describe it as an adrenaline activity. It's just utterly lovely.
Yeah, I think when you get like a hippo breach and they make that incredible sound, and it's just so loud that it fills your body
right next to the boat, right next to your canoe. Yeah, exactly.
But it feels very safe at the same time because of the guiding. So it's excitement. Yeah, it's really is excitement.
It's great, isn't it? So then I think probably the final question I'm going to pose to you, again, has been asked by two or three people, in fact, is about travelling around in Zim. And of course, you travel around by light aircraft, which is really probably our preferred method, isn't it? It's the quickest and simplest and most straightforward way of getting people around. But one or two people have mentioned things like weight allowance for luggage and hand luggage on light aircraft, and for photographers and so on. Is that an issue?
Yeah, so I mean, there is always a slight weight allowance when it comes to these kind of safari taxi flights and small Cessna planes, and they do ask you to have soft-sided luggage. But that being said, all the lodges have laundry available, facilities included, so you can kind of call back on your weight in terms of clothing and things like that. But obviously, camera kit is very heavy and you want to take a lot of it with you, and that's completely understandable. So for those of you who are really keen to take more kit with you, then there's always the option to pay a little bit more of a supplement for these aircraft flights. Just make sure you can have that extra allowance.
Buy an extra seat on the plane, effectively, is really what we're saying, isn't it? Which is pretty straightforward thing for us to organise.
Yeah, and with our photography tour that we do with Brett, we we accommodate for that already.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it's worth saying that with more and more people having mirrorless cameras and so on, the mirrorless cameras are lighter weight. You don't need to take quite so much gear, and of course increasingly the lenses are getting lighter and smaller and shorter and goodness knows what else, and just as good quality in many cases, though not all, I'm sure. So look, Sarah, that was absolutely fantastic. I'm not going to ask whether somebody should go to Zambia or Zimbabwe, because we might fight over that one, and that would be a disaster. Why do one or the other? Why not go to both?
Yeah, absolutely. Compare them for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go to both and compare them. Yeah, do a safari in one and do an extension to the other, or but make the two the same length, and then you can meet in the middle at Victoria Falls. Hey, look, that was absolutely super. Thank you so much. May I just request that you can you just put that last slide on for me? That'd be fab. Thank you. So look, thanks ever so much to Sarah for her presentation on Zimbabwe, which is absolutely super. It's a place that I love, as you can probably detect anyway. It's clearly a place that Sarah loves. Lovely to see her photos and some of the others. I will provide you with a link to the YouTube piece that Sarah mentioned. I'll do that as part of the follow-up email, which you'll get either this evening or tomorrow. Once again, as usual, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and spend your evening with us. It's very good of you. And the next presentation is this coming Thursday, which is all about Madagascar with Nick Garbett, which hopefully we will be able to get through without any technical issues. But once again, thank you so much, and we'll see you on Thursday.